Today I'm going to do a little work on the 59 Chevy. The ball joint on the lower side of this right front tire is bad. I was greasing the chassis and noticed I had it jacked up. There's a little looseness in that ball joint. So that ball joint is going to get replaced today. I'll make a video on changing it. This is the new ball joint right here. You can see where this attaches into the control arm there and there. This is where this nut and lock washer will go on there and above the control arm. This is the nut that holds it into the spindle. These are the bolts that hold these into the control arm. There's one of these on the one end. That's where the steering knuckle will hit the stop. It comes with 3 bolts, so if you don't have that on your car, you can use one of these. Comes with the nuts, it comes with washers, although it's missing a washer. Comes with a grease fitting, cotter pin for the ball joint there, and the ever so important grease boot that will go on here before you install the joint and the spindle. So don't go putting it in the spindle and forget to put that on. So we're going to start working on removing the old ball joint and throw this one in. Well, to separate the ball joint from the spindle, you take the cotter pin out of that nut, loosen that nut up, and you can either smack this with a hammer or you can put a pickle fork in here. If you're going to use a pickle fork, you'll destroy your rubber boot, so you won't be able to reuse it. If you use a hammer on this, you'll be able to reuse your boot. So this is the first step, and then the second step will be taking out these bolts. This nut, the ball joint will drop out. I can put the new ball joint in. So let's try and get this separated. Well, maybe a pickle fork might be where I'm going to go with that. Usually that pops right out. I thought, being that the car was kept greased, that would pop out, but I think what I need to do is to get that off is have the suspension lifted up a little bit so this has room to drop. So we're just going to get a pickle fork out on that. This is what I mean by pickle fork. You can see how it's beveled, and you stick this in there, and when you hit it, it puts pressure and separates those two. So we'll see if we can get this thing to pop off. These things can be a little bit of a nightmare, so we'll see what we can do here. Well, I got the ball joint separated. I had to move the camera out of the way so I could get a good swing on my pickle fork, but that is separated now. So now I can jack this up to lift that out of this, swing this out of the way, and I can get the rest of the bolts out and we can do a change. So I'll get my little bottle jack out and just jack this up. Okay, the ball joint's separated, and with the magic editing we can jack that control arm with that ball joint up to get it out of the spindle. And it is free of the spindle, so now I can, and the tie rod's still attached. Whoops, sorry, bumping the camera there. The tie rod's still attached, so I'm just going to have to hold it up out of the way. I don't want to take the tie rod off. But you can get the gist of what I'm doing here with you just kind of hold this out of the way. You can undo these bolts, this nut, and drop that joint out. Change your joint with this really here. This isn't really going to, you know, it's a little in the way. You could wire it up out of the way. I just can't be bothered. So I'm going to get some tools and get the rest of that joint out. You need to get the grease zert off. That's a 3/8 wrench, fits the grease zert. So you take the fitting off, which is above the ball joint here. I don't know if that shows up in the video or not. You can't get that nut off the grease fitting there, so just take it out. And that fits it. Now if this was the OEM ball joint, I'd take this nut off. I'd have to get that control arm out of the way because I'd have to air chisel off those the rivets. The OEM ball joints are riveted into the control arm. The replacement ones are bolted in. That's the nut and the washer off the top. I'll let the spottle jack down and let the control arm rest on the jack stand so I can get in there and with the wrench. The shock absorber's in, so the spring shouldn't go firing out. If your shock absorber isn't in, yeah, you can, your spring will come out if this thing goes free. I need a socket on that one, something, that wrench on the other side of that one was turning. Don't think it'll fit there either. Oh yeah, it will. Bolts out. Bolts out. Ball joints out. Alright, this is the new ball joint. Let me pop some of this crud before I put the new one in. The grease is, dirt and crud has preserved these control arms and ball joints, and they're in pretty good shape. So I generally just leave a little bit of grease and crud on them. It doesn't hurt anything. It keeps them from rusting. So there's the surface wipe down. New ball joint. I'm just going to put these bolts in loose for now, get everything in place, and I'll go around and tighten them up. That's actually going to be a bite with that brake drum there. It's caught on the control arm, so I'm going to jack it up. Put that lock washer on, put this nut on. This bolt in. Whoops. Alright, that bolt's in place. I know my nuts and lock washers. Sounds like a lawn service at the neighbors. It's kind of funny, a lot of these houses around here have like what I call postage stamp lots, because, you know, where I grew up there was a lot of property and they come with these huge commercial mowers, and about 2 passes they're done. Now these need to be torqued, so I'll get the torque wrench out, and if it'll fit. It may not be able to fit a socket in here. I might just have to say click with my wrenches. And after this is done, it's a good idea to have a front end alignment. I only have one person that I know can do a good front end alignment, and they're up in Romeo, Nightingales. It's the only place I can take a car and I can get it back and it's done right the first time. Everywhere else, you gotta take it back 2-3 times, the steering wheel's off center or something's not right, but they get it right every time first time. And so that's where I'll take it after it's done, maybe next week or something. Run up to Romeo to see my dad or do something up there. I'll drop it off at Nightingales and have the front end aligned. And I'll get a torque wrench out, torque those to specs. I don't think I'll be able to torque the little bolts, but I'll be able to torque that. I don't know if this will fit. Get that out of the way. Well, it's already at its torque spec. And I'm just going to tighten these bottom ones up because there's no way I'm going to get a torque wrench in there. These are 20 to 25 foot-pounds. Click. Click. That's probably way more, which isn't good, but they're tight. Let that a little bit of ways away so I can get the dust boot in there. I always point the little thing where the excessive grease escapes out away from the brake drum. The joint is pointing down, this is like that, so I need to get that joint out a little bit so it slips up in there. And the new joints are really hard to move. The old ones, worn out one, just kind of flops around. Yep. And that's even a bigger wrench, that's 7/8. I buzzed the other one off with the impact gun, so let me get a wrench to fit that. I'm not going to put it on with the impact gun. And we'll put the grease fitting in, grease it up. And hopefully it'll be done. I might adjust the brake so I have it jacked up. And I'll point the grease fitting out the front so I can just throw the grease gun on it when I'm under the car. So I got to torque that nut and put the cotter pin in, grease the fitting, and the ball joints replaced. And then I'll adjust the brakes. These old cars don't have self-adjusters, so you got to adjust them periodically. Ball joint torque spec for that nut is 35 to 45 foot-pounds. And you got to get the cotter pin through, so I guess I'll torque it, and then if I have to tighten a little bit more, I will. Gotta find where the hole is for the, right, it's straight across. So I need to have one of those right there. This will be 45 foot-pounds. And it's there. And I am going to tighten it a little bit more to get that cotter pin in. Cotter pin hits the backing plate a little bit, so I'm going to have to start bending it right now. This is the way the old one was too. Bend it up like that so I don't cut myself on it in the future when I'm working on the car. So there are the joints installed. Now to put a little bit of grease in it, and then it's done. I can move on to putting the wheel back on and adjusting the brakes. My dad made me this like sleeve for this grease gun because the grease drips out of the things, you know. So I took an old shirt sleeve, tied a string around the end to make a thing, and then you don't get grease doesn't drip out everywhere. And there's the grease coming out right there. And I don't want to use this. This is my sleeve. What's the matter with me? We got a new ball joint all greased up, ready to go for a ride, but I am going to adjust the brakes first. And like I say, it's always a good idea to have a front end alignment after doing suspension work on a car. As long as the wheel is off, and I'll pull a drum and have a look at the brake shoes. And they're actually still like new. Bunch of brake dust. Asbestos is what that stuff is. Wheel cylinder is nice and clean, dry. Springs, everything look good. Shoes are amazing shape. This is the adjuster. And cars with self-adjusting brakes have a little cable that goes around through doodad. And when you apply the brakes and there's too much movement in them, this little lever comes down and moves that to tighten it up. These cars don't have self-adjusting brakes, so you just gotta get in there with a brake spoon and do it occasionally. Good brakes. I'm going to put the tire back on to adjust the brake. It's hard to see for the brake adjuster, but there's a little rubber grommet right there you pull out. Dust, water, whatever. That gets you to the access point to the brake. Let me try and get this camera a little better. So when you put this in there and you turn that star wheel, you can see I still got a little bit of drag, but not a lot. And that's pretty good right there. I don't want it to freewheel, but I don't want it to bind. So just a slight bit of drag here and there is usually pretty good. Put your dust boot back in and then do the other side so it's equal. So when you apply the brakes, they don't pull. It is on the front of the backing plate on that side. I only do this once every couple of years for the amount of miles I put on the car. I mean, back in the day, probably, a couple times a year you'd have to have the brakes adjusted. That was just part of the routine maintenance on the cars. Try and get this. So that's the little plug. Put your spoon in. This side's a little bit less to where I need to turn it. Turn that other one 3 clicks. That's 2 clicks, and that's probably about the same. You can feel that star wheel bump through the spring when you turn it. Yeah, that's about the same as this side. I like to compare the two. Yep, so that's pretty good. Everything looks good over here. Put that back in. The front brakes are adjusted. Usually you do the fronts twice to the rears once. In adjusting and in wearing the front brakes on, cars do most of the stopping. So usually you replace the front shoes and then the rear shoes the second time you have to do the front shoes. And the drums are larger on the front, the shoes are wider because they do most of the stopping. But that is a simple brake adjustment on a 1959 Chevrolet. So I'll take this thing out for a test ride, see how it goes with the new ball joint, and maybe see about getting an alignment done on it in the next week or so. Ball joint all nicely installed. So get it off the jack. I'll torque the lug nuts on that wheel I had off and get her down and try it out.